Hello there, everybody. This is Checkerboard Chat. I'm David Bradford. This is Tyler Wombles. I know you're used to seeing Trenton Duffer and Rob Harvey, but we have staged a coup, and it is our podcast now.
Very true.
No. We're the Lady Vols beat writers, so now we're going to have our own episode of the podcast, I guess. And the regular season starts Friday, I believe, for the Lady Vols.
It does start Friday.
But there was an exhibition match against Carson Newman on Monday, which the Lady Vols won 95-56. They looked kind of started out slow, but they pulled away in the second half, I guess. Wombles, what are some of your takeaways from that game?
They did start slow. Obviously, one thing that I noticed from the game was there were some problems in the passing game. Obviously, Jordan Reynolds is the starting point guard as she has been, but Taya Cooper is out for the season with a knee injury, so Alexa Middleton had to step up and play that backup point guard spot as she will the rest of the season. And I thought Alexa Middleton played well and she led the team well, but there was a couple problems with communication. Mercedes Russell several times got the ball in the post and then had a problem passing it out to Middleton, who was out on the wing. This happened several times.
Yeah, she was screaming for the ball, and was saying Mercedes' name out loud. And Mercedes did not pass her the ball on both occasions. I think one time Mercedes did find someone for a three, but then the other time she turned it over. But yeah, the guard position is something to watch out due to the injuries. But how do you think some of the forwards played, like Nard and Nunn and Harris?
I thought they played well. I don't remember exactly the amount of points that Nard had, but I think it was a pretty good mark. Obviously, she's going to be a difference maker there. She's going to be a good player. I can't remember exactly how much Harris played. I don't think she played a whole lot. She's probably not going to be a player that's going to play too much this season unless, there's probably an injury to Mercedes Russell. But I'd say overall, they played pretty well.
All right, and then what do you think about, aside from Mercedes did have a couple miscues in the passing game, what do you think of her performance in that game?
Other than the miscues, I thought she did okay. She was, I think, second on the team in scoring. She had around...
I think she had 20 points.
Yeah, 20 points, I think was it. She was a 10 of 20 shooting. So, that's good play in the post. Have a 50% or higher field goal percentage. The thing is, though, Carson Newman, they just didn't have anyone that could physically match up against Mercedes Russell.
That's true.
She's a 6'6" center.
They were all smaller.
Exactly.
Than every player they had. So.
And I think that is a concern for Russell. Throughout the rest of the season is when they play those ranked teams, especially, can she match up against players that are closer to her size?
Yeah, and it is an exhibition game, so you really have to take things with a grain of salt. Carson Newman obviously doesn't have the size that Tennessee has. But, you mentioned those things, and there were some positives. But looking now into the whole season, because it starts Friday on the road at James Madison, I guess let's start on the positive note. What do you think are some of the strengths of this team heading into the season?
Well, obviously they have Domanda Shields, who is a standout player.
Yes.
She was a all SEC first team during the preseason. She's a junior guard. She's just a scoring machine. She's very good. She's a good shooter. And I think another strength is just motivation for the squad. Obviously, last season they broke the record for most losses in a season in program history. They did make it to the Elite Eight, but Holly Warlick has been talking all offseason about how there's a different feel with this program right now.
She said it over and over again, yeah.
She did, and I think that will definitely prove motivation for them to leave a good legacy behind for some of these upperclassmen like Russell and DeShields.
Yeah, you mentioned DeShields, and I know when I talked to her, she's finally entering a season healthy. That's something that she just hasn't had that luxury yet.
It's true.
And then you mentioned last season. I think motivation's a great point because, they kind of played it off. During media days and all that stuff, we're on to this season. But, you mentioned the most program losses. I think they also had the most conference losses, lowest conference finish, lowest seed in a tournament. And then they kind of turned it on in the NCAA tournament, which is great for them. But they still have that whole season was not really a complete body of work. It was not what many expect from the Tennessee Lady Vols. And they entered last season preseason number 4, and then this season's 13. So that's a significant drop-off. 13 is normally good, but for Tennessee it isn't. And so, I agree with the strengths that you mentioned, but what about some of the weaknesses? Because there are some glaring holes on this team that could potentially lead to maybe a similar season like last season.
There are, David, and I think the obvious number one weakness is depth. This team has been gutted by injuries. Obviously, Andrea Carter left the team during the summer because of recurring knee issues. Sophomore Taya Cooper, who was a big presence for the squad last season, is out for the year. Sheridan Green, who's a forward transfer from, actually she's from ASA College in Brooklyn, but she's originally from London. She's out for the season as well with a torn ACL. There's going to be definitely depth issues there that the team must address. Alexa Middleton, who was essentially third or fourth string point guard, is going to have to step up into that backup role, as is some of the other forwards are going to have to take time, take pressure off of Mercedes Russell at the 5. And I think that they're just going to have to force themselves to either play through a lot of those injuries and play through the time of it, or find other people that can just swap out well.
This will definitely be like Warlick's toughest coaching job, because how is she going to figure out how to get a good rotation when you only have 9 players?
Exactly.
And about 2 or 3 of those players either don't have a lot of playing time. Actually, you could say 4 players don't have a lot of playing experience yet, or they're new to the program, like Nunn is. And then you said Alexa Middleton, fourth option last year at point guard. Mimi Jackson, she didn't play a whole lot last year. And then you have Harris, who's a freshman, so she's not where she needs to be right now in order to get a lot of playing time, but she might be forced into that role if, let's say, another injury happens. Like, if another injury happens on this team, let's say to, like, Courtney Dunbar or God forbid anybody, but if another injury happens on this team, what do you think that could, like, show in the season?
That could derail the season. You're talking about the Lady Vols are playing one of their toughest schedules in program history. Arguably the toughest schedule in college women's basketball this season. They're going to need all the talent that they have still available to even compete with these teams. If they lose one player, much less a player like Reynolds or Russell or DeShields, it could be really bad for this team and could give them multiple more losses than if they had all those players healthy. And
so with the lack of depth that they have, and so they have to rely mainly on 4 players, I think anyway, Jordan Reynolds, Diamond DeShields, Jamie Nard, and Mercedes Russell to really carry a heavy load. Do you see any one of those 4 players like exceeding what they did last year? Do you see any of those players potentially like regressing? Because I know you voiced some concerns earlier.
I think that when you have such a team where the roster depth is really cut, that does allow for certain players to sort of come in and become a superstar of the team and take over. So I think that's definitely a role that DeShields could take over. Russell, if she stays healthy and can find a way to contribute. But I don't know. I think that that's really the only way that could actually help.
And then also another area of concern is the front court, which, they have a lot of guards. So even though they have a lot of injuries at that position, they still have players who can fill that role. But now the post is just completely wiped out. Because, you had Bashara Graves last year. She was a senior. She's now in the WNBA. And so you have Mercedes Russell. You have Nunn, and then you have Harris. But those 2 players, we don't know what they're going to provide. So, do you think that potentially, like, who of those 2 players can fill that role that Bashara Graves did have, if anybody can at all? And do you think that could potentially put too much pressure on Mercedes Russell to perform this season?
I think that will definitely put a lot of pressure on Mercedes Russell. If it's going to be either of those 2 players between Nunn or Harris, it'll be Nunn, I'd say. Kamira Harris, she does, and Kamira Harris has talent, but she's just a freshman. Yeah. She's too young to be competing seriously in this type of schedule. I think that they would have to use Nunn in that situation.
Yeah, I agree with that 100%. Nunn was at Winthrop for 3 years and sat out last year. I agree with you that she'd take over the role. I don't think she'd be as effective as Graves was, because Graves is really good in the post for them. But they do need someone to take the pressure off Russell, because as talented as Russell is, eventually at some point during the season you could get worn out. I don't care who you are. And that could potentially pose a problem against some of the more athletic teams like South Carolina in the front court is just monstrous. And so that's definitely going to be an area of concern again in that game. But they also play Notre Dame, Baylor, Texas, Stanford, Mississippi State, Kentucky, all these great teams that have great front court players. So that's definitely something to keep an eye on. And speaking of all those teams and their tough schedule, and the SEC is arguably the toughest conference in all of women's college basketball, do you see this team finishing with a better record this year than last year, or do you see the lack of depth potentially leading to an even worse season?
Well, in the predictions for the Beacon, I have the Lady Vols finishing the regular season 23-6.
Okay.
I do think they will have a little bit of a better record because just for players like Russell and DeShields, more experience in playing in this sort of a slate of games. But I do not think it's going to be much of a difference. It may be just 1 game or 2 game more of an increase. I think that it will take at least 1 more year for Holly Woolert to get over that hump, especially after this season where they're going to have so many players on injured reserve.
I'm going to have to challenge you on your math there.
Okay.
Because you said 23-6, and they won, I think, 18 or 19 games? So it's just confirmed that Wombles can't do math. But we'll let that slide.
I thought they went 22.
But that's counting the tournament, though.
Oh, we're not counting the tournament?
Well, because 23 is the regular season.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
I can't do math. It is confirmed.
I'm not trusting you with stats ever
But
in
no,
any game.
don't trust me with stats.
Like someone could hit like a half-court shot. You count it for like a free throw. Like I think that's what's going to happen now.
Well, okay. So I see what you're saying. I do. So with that, math,
I'm just messing with you. No, I'm just messing with you. I see what you're saying. Like
Yeah.
I see what you're saying. Like I feel like their schedule this season it's tough, but I would disagree that it's their toughest yet. They play some cupcake teams. I mean, of course they play all those ranked teams, and those are going to be challenges. I mean, I have the same record as you, 23-6,
Right.
and 13-3 in conference play. I just think this team is just more put together, more experienced, and Diamond DeShields healthy is one of the best players in the country. She proved that in North Carolina her freshman season, and it was kind of hit or miss last year, but that's due to injuries. But I see what you're saying with the record. It should be an improvement. I mean, I know this team is motivated. You said motivation was the key. So, but speaking of Diamond DeShields or even Mercedes Russell, do you have any like bold predictions on this season other than like the record increase, which could be perceived as bold by some people?
One bold prediction that I think may actually come true is that Mercedes Russell will actually lose significant playing time. This is a bold prediction because they don't really have a backup center. I mean, they have a backup center, but they don't really have anyone else who can come in and fill that spot. I could see the Lady Vols going in some 3 forward sets for sure with maybe Nunn, Nard, and maybe Mimi Jackson is one who's sort of a hybrid player who can play both forward and guard. I think that if Mercedes Russell cannot get it down, one thing that we saw in the exhibition, obviously we talked about with her passing, her basketball IQ seems to need a little bit of work. I'm not saying that she doesn't know the game. I'm just saying she needs to understand what's going on the court a little bit better, and if that doesn't happen, I could see her losing a significant amount of minutes.
So I get what you're saying, but do you think that the team would risk that given that they're so thin at that position? Or are you saying like they're just going to focus more on having like 3 guards and 2 forwards? Do you think that's like the set that they're going to run with most of the season given the lack of depth in the center position?
I think they may have to. I think it really just comes down to how well Russell plays. I mean, obviously they're going to need her to produce, and they're going to need her there anyways. So she's going to get minutes no matter what.
Yeah.
I mean, she's going to start, but at the end of the day, when it comes to sports, if you don't produce, you don't produce. And so, and I'm not saying she's not going to produce at all, but
And then if you do produce, you do produce.
Exactly. So if Mercedes Russell cannot get that totally down, I could see her losing some minutes.
Yeah. I have a bold prediction. I don't know if you want to hear it, but I'm going to say it anyway.
Let's hear it.
And I'm about to shock the nation here. That's actually not that shocking. Diamond DeShields, SEC Player of the Year this year. I mean, it's not too bold given how talented she is, but I know a lot of people are looking at like Asia Wilson over at South Carolina or even Elena Coates at South Carolina. Every player on South Carolina's team, pretty much. No one's really paying too much attention. At Tennessee, that's actually interesting because Jamie Nard actually said that she feels like not a lot of people are paying attention to this team, and she kind of likes that.
did.
So, I mean, that's kind of unique for Tennessee Lady Vols that maybe not a lot of people are sleeping on them. So maybe that could potentially be a strength. But back to Diamond DeShields. I mean, when you watch her play, I don't know, like athletically, she just seems better than everybody on the court,
She
especially
does.
when she's healthy. I mean, she can like dribble the ball. Like I shouldn't compare her to me. I'm the worst dribbler of all time, and I have really small hands, so I can't dribble at all. But she just dribbles so fluidly. She can do so many different things on the court.
She can.
And she's such an athlete that one of the coaches said that she could play like all like 4 positions except for center. But if she was asked to play center, she would play it anyway.
Hey.
But and also given that they have such limited depth, I could see her stats just like going through the roof. Because I mean, 14 points a game last year, it's modest for her. She averaged 18 in her freshman year in North Carolina. So I'm going to go with Diamond Shields SEC Player of the Year. I mean, she looked really good against Carson Newman. I mean, I know it's just against Carson Newman, but she wasn't settling as much as she used to on jump shots, and she was driving to the paint, and she was doing great at passing, which is another thing that people don't really pay attention to. Her game is that she can pass the ball. So, I mean, that's my bold prediction. I mean, do you think that's bold at all?
I think it's a little bit bold, but I don't think it's not going to happen. I mean, definitely. It's Diamond Shields is a crazy good talent. She's one of the best in the SEC, obviously. And I know Carson Newman was a Division II school, but she just played lots out, and I think that's definitely a good prediction, David.
Yeah. I mean, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome, pal.
One last thing to talk about, and it has nothing to do with really what's on the court, because we talked about a lot, lack of depth, Diamond Shields, Mercedes Russell. One interesting area I think to focus on this season is Holly Warlick and the coaching. Because I know last year there was the whole, fire, quote unquote, fire Holly campaign or whatever. Because Tennessee fans are spoiled, like Lady Vol basketball fans are spoiled. 8 championships, I mean, Sweet 16 every year except for one, and they made every NCAA tournament. And so there's kind of more expectation on her this season to perform better, obviously, after last season. But I mean, do you think that this season is really fair, like to judge her at such a high standard, given the lack of depth? What do you really expect from her? Will you be shocked if the team performs worse this year than last year?
I don't think I'll be shocked. Yeah. As I said, when I was trying to do my math and couldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think that the team will have maybe a few more wins than they did last season. Well, obviously more than a few because I can't do math.
A few is 3. So.
Yeah, but
man, you're just off, man. Sorry.
I think that. Well, you know what? When you're on, you're on. You're off, you're off. But anyways, I think that if the team does not have a very good season, I do not think it should be a big knock against Holly Warlick because obviously, what can you do when you have 9 players healthy?
Yeah.
I think that is a mark of a great coach when they can take a team that's so injury shot and sort of build something around that and still be successful. But I don't think that you can fire a coach because of that. I think that Holly deserves at least one more year after this season, if they're not successful, to see what she's really made of.
Yeah, I view the season as just completely like fans just enjoy watching it, but don't expect too much because, I mean, like we mentioned before, one injury could just send this season out of control. And so I think next year this team will be really, really good.
I think so.
I mean, the players, hopefully for their sake, will return healthy. And that will be the year I think people should really judge Holly off of. I mean, of course, she's following Pat Summitt, and that's, someone that not many people can follow. But real quick, just before we head out here, any particular games on the schedule you're really excited covering for?
I'm just excited to watch Notre Dame. I mean, I know that's not going to be – I'm not going to say it's not going to be a great game. I think Notre Dame will probably take that game for sure. But it'll just be interesting. There'll be a lot of excitement at Thompson Bowling that day, and I think it'll just be fun. Anytime you get to host the number 1 team in the nation, that's a big deal. And I think it'll just be a fun game to watch.
Yeah, I agree with that, Notre Dame, and I wish they would play UConn again, but that's never going to happen. All right, we're going to finish with that. I'm David Bradford. That's Tyler Wombles. We'll be covering Lady Vols all season long, so if you want to read some dope gamers and notebooks, just head over to the Daily Beacon's website. Pick up a paper, too. There's a lot of great content. Like I said, David Bradford, Tyler Wombles. This is Checkerboard Chat. See you guys later.